Hello and welcome back to Assetto Corsa for yet another video on the Nordschleife challenge. Thank you very much for joining me in this video, and today we are going to be taking a look at the second Alfa to make its way onto this challenge after the Mito QV, which did not do such a great job. I suppose it did a great job for what the vehicle is, but in the rankings at 9 minutes and 2 seconds or something, not exactly challenging for the top of the leaderboard by far. This one, however, should be a little way up the order. I say a little way, it should be quite a lot up the order. This is the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Now, this car was released, I believe, in 2016 or 2017. Alfa Romeo decided to release this version of the car before the standard version of the car. Bit strange, normally you release the base version and then the sporty version, but in this case they released the sporty version and the base version, and of course now I know they have an even sportier, absolutely insane version of this car that is unfortunately not in Assetto Corsa. This car is powered by a 2.9 litre V6, twin turbo V6, derived off a Ferrari V8, I think the same V8 that went in the 458 or 488 and the California T. Was it the California T that's had the V8? I think so, I'm not 100% certain, but certainly the one that came off the 458 or 488, that sort of V8, but it is derived off that, so it is a V6. It produces 510 brake horsepower, sorry, not 510, 503 brake horsepower, 510 PS, at 6,500 RPM and 600 Newton meters of torque, which is 442 pound-feet of torque, at 2,500 up to 5,000 RPM. So it does have a nice flat sort of plateau of the torque between 2.5 and 5,000 RPM, which is respectable. Some cars have a greater range there, some cars only have a peak. This is nice, a respectable plateau. In this car, this is mated to a 6-speed manual transmission, not the 8-speed automatic that we unfortunately got in the UK, and I think some other countries also got that. So already going up in the rankings in my head, in the driver rankings, because it has a manual transmission to it. That manual transmission then goes through to a rear-wheel drive. So this is a rear-wheel drive car, meaning that I should be able to get the back of this car sliding a little bit, dependent on the other characteristics of the vehicle. Speaking of the other characteristics of the vehicle, tyres on this car are 245/35 R19s at the front and 285/50 R19s on the rear. The mass of this car is 1,655 kilograms or 3,649 pounds. Top speed of this vehicle, 307 kilometers per hour, which is 191 miles per hour. I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned kilometers per hour first, but that number was just sticking in my head as to the specs that I read earlier on, with a 0 to 60 of 3.9 seconds. Now, I'm not sure if that 3.9 seconds is quoted for the automatic or for the manual. I really am not sure. That is 0 to 62 miles per hour. 0 to 60 would be about 3.8 seconds. I think that is pretty much everything when it comes to the specifications that are required. So very quickly I'm going to bring up on the screen the lap times from the last video. Now, the Porsche 911R leads the way at 7 minutes 39 seconds, but it is on hypercar road tyres, something that I had an option for in this car, but I've chosen not to go for because I think the street tyres are the better tyres to go for. Now, does that disqualify the Porsche? I am not sure. Leave your comments giving me your thoughts on that, whether the Porsche should be disqualified for being on hypercar road tyres. Aside from that, I do not think this car is going to be battling for the top positions, but can it make it onto the first page? Can it, for example, displace the M4 or the 512 Testarossa or the Lotus Exige? Can it do any of those? I do not think I'm going to be getting a sub 8 minutes, particularly on the street tyres, but I cannot see this vehicle being any slower than an 8 minutes 10, which would put it into 11th position. There's only one way to find out. As usual, I'm going to be doing a couple of Patreon practice laps, so if you want to see those, please do support me on Patreon and they will be uploaded there. But what you are going to see next is going to be some proper laps where I'm going to try and essentially get the best out of this car and then give you my thoughts once the time's up on the board. Give you my thoughts as to what I think, so make sure you stay tuned. Alright, let's see what this car is capable of. I've done my practice laps and I will admit that there are certain things about this car that I will mention that I think are both good and bad, and I'll start with the good. First of all, the car sounds really nice. It is a really nice sounding car. It truly is. I think that quad exhaust on the V6, it does sound really nice. It has a very low pitched noise. I can imagine this car being annoying if you were taking it out on a motorway. I truly can imagine this car being a little bit annoying, pottering around 70 miles per hour. I think that noise would start drumming into your head, just that low pitch feel, or at least you'll be able to feel it through your body. And whilst it is nice to be able to feel something like that, I'm fairly certain you would not want to be feeling that all the time if you're driving for 2-3 hours. Although that being said, I think the fuel economy of this car, 2-3 hours of driving on the motorway is probably, no, actually you should be able to get more with the size of its fuel tank. I'm just doing some calculations here. 4, 5 on a motorway, 70 miles an hour. You probably get around 400 miles on the tank, I think. You probably would get around 400 miles on the tank, so you could drive for a few hours, actually, maybe 6 hours or so, but certainly no more than that before you'd have to fill up. And I'm sure you'd have to take a break before that just to get away from the noise of this car. It is quite boomy and drony, but as I said, when it is on song, when you have the power down, then it is quite nice. In fact, you can hear it here. It's very lively. So the sound of this car is really nice. I like the way this car looks as well. I have to say that is something that is quite important. The looks of the car. It's always nice to have a car that, I think this car in the future, along with many Alfa Romeos, will be a classic when these go out of production. I know they're still making these, but once these are out of production, I think that this will certainly be a classic, not just for the car's noise, but for the looks as well. Now, in terms of driving this car, first of all, I feel like cars like these are designed to be driven with traction control and ABS on. As soon as you switch those features off, you start feeling the car struggling a bit, and there's a twofold thing to this. One is Assetto Corsa and my hardware. So obviously Assetto Corsa has fantastic force feedback, and I think it has one of the best physics simulations that you can get around for most cars. I'm not saying for every single car, but for most cars you have some fantastic physics simulations. And obviously my hardware, which at this moment in time, at the time of recording, is a very old Logitech G27, there is a limitation as to how much I can feel and how much I can compensate with on the car. But that being said, I'm still able to get pretty fast lap times out of a number of vehicles. So what I feel from this car is that this car is very much designed to have the the aids on, particularly, not so much traction control, particularly ABS. That is the one aid I feel the most. Just like a number of cars have this issue, where you're braking, and as you saw there, the lockups, it's very easy to lock up the car just because the brakes are so sharp that you're having to compensate. Now, I have had to reduce my braking to 80% of maximum before I even got in the car to drive. That just tells you how sharp the brakes were. When I first tried it, I hit the brakes and locked up at about 25% braking power. So I thought, well, that's going to be rather untenable. I'm not going to be able to actually do a recording with that. It's just is not going to work. So I dropped it down. Now I still have problems with locking, not as much, but I am still having problems with locking of the wheels. And I'm trying to do my best to compensate as best as I can with what I have in the best manner possible. But it's one of those things that, again, I look at it and I think this car is designed specifically to run with these assists on. Switch them off, the car really struggles. And that does also go to an extent for traction control. Now, without traction control, you can see how easy I am having to be on the throttle going through the corners. There is so much torque and so much power in this car that it just wants to slide the rear wheels over and over, and it makes me reconsider using street tyres over the hypercar road tyres. So if you think I should, when I do a rerun of this, do hypercar road tyres, let me know, because it might be an easier drive. I'm not sure how realistic that would make it, but it may certainly be an easier drive. Nevertheless, I am doing my best to get a solid lap time out of this car. You just saw there how the car just veered off. Where I hit the brakes, it pinged off, and there was nothing I could do to recover it. I had to just let the brakes carry through. In terms of turning capability of this car is very agile. I have to give it that. Far more agile than you would think, but it does suffer from an odd, this might be an odd way to describe it, but it suffers from the Audi understeer. Not a huge amount, but you can certainly feel it, and it's very noticeable. You go into a corner a little too fast, and it is extremely noticeable, this Audi understeer. I say Audi understeer, so it's Audi style understeer. And because of that, you really have to be aware of the speed that you're doing in this car, because it makes it very difficult to what's the right term, to string together a sequence of corners if you get understeer in just one of them. It really makes it difficult. In terms of power, this car has insane amounts. I mean, it just goes and goes and goes. That is something that this car is very good at. No doubt about that. And I suppose that it does make sense with its 500 odd horsepower. 8 minutes 6. I did say it would go between 8 minutes and 8 minutes 10, didn't I? And I think this car has a lot more in it. Obviously, we're now fighting against the M4. Whatever time the M4 was, I'm not 100% certain. And the Testarossa. But this car does have a lot more in it. It's just a matter of getting it, dialing it in, and being able to use the power that the car's got, use the torque that the car's got to actually get the lap time out of it, because it's so slidey at times that you're often counter steering to try and compensate, and that is very much the case in a lot of these corners. So just something to note about the car. The other thing that I do not like about the car, I think this is the biggest criticism I have of this car, is it feels like it's very stiffly sprung. So all these bumps that I'm going over are having quite an impact on, oh dear, on this car. They are having quite a significant impact on this car, and I think that is also not helping with the lockups, because obviously it loses traction, so there isn't that much friction. It's much easier for the wheels to just lock with the braking force that's being applied, and that is something that I think does not help this car. If it was slightly more softly sprung, it would be much better in my opinion. Not too much more softly sprung. Obviously we're not looking for rally style, this is a sports car, not a rally car, but I think this is just a little bit too harsh on the suspension. I think the damping is okay, the damping is definitely okay, it's just that the springs are really harsh, so you do not get that initial, when you go over a bump you feel it lose traction, and it does not help really. Come on, turn in, there we go. Now I read that this car had some interesting torque vectoring on it built in. Now maybe that is one of the reasons why it is so agile. It does feel a little bit different to other cars when I'm turning. But it's not a huge difference. I had to just watch it there for a lockup. Oh, that's lost me a lot of time. And that is what I mean when I'm talking about sliding. Just a little bit too much on the power there, and I've lost a good 2 seconds just through that section. I can probably make it up, but I think this is the downside of this car. It's so powerful, and it has so much to give, but it cannot give it if it cannot put that power down. And let's see, obviously we do have a third lap should I want it. And I probably will take it. Third lap, in general, if you watch my videos, the third lap is generally where one of two things happen. Either I crash spectacularly with a spin that ends up in a wall, followed by a 720 or something, or something along those lines, or I string together a near perfect lap for the practice that I've put in, and I end up going 3 or 4 seconds faster. Normally one of those two things happen. We'll have to see what happens on this occasion for the third lap, but I'm not expecting, I am expecting this car to, I think it is capable of reaching, I think I'm capable of getting this car down to maybe 8 minutes 2. I do think that I'm capable of that. I think an 8 minutes 2 is probably possible, so that's the Lotus Exige S territory. Past the Testarossa and the M5. The M5 is an 8 minutes 5, the Testarossa is an 8 minutes 5. So we're looking to extend beyond those. At the moment we're sitting at an 8 minutes 6 with the mess up that I had, so it just shows that this car does have it in it to do that. It's just I really have to be focused on the driving, like more so than the other cars, than I sort of focus for the other cars, which is something that's happened before. I mean, this isn't the first time this has happened. I think what was the last car that I really had to focus on to get a lap time out of? Was it the 570S that I had to really focus on? And obviously the CTR Yellowbird, which was an insane vehicle. But I think the 570S was another one of the vehicles like this, very difficult to get going. In terms of balance for this car it's fairly well balanced. I think that I would describe this car as having a slight rearwards bias, but overall it is fairly well balanced. Nothing too significant to note about that. It isn't like some cars which are very rearwards biased or very forwards biased. The balance of this car does feel fairly neutral. I wouldn't say it's perfectly 50-50, but certainly if I can feel a little bit more on the rear of the car being more unstable. So I suppose it's the way the balance is slightly forward, which gives it the slide at the rear, which has just led to that happening. So one more lap to go with this, and then we shall see where it goes. At the very least, we've got it into 11th place. That is its minimum. At this point in time, with this estimated lap time I'm looking at, that is that looks like that's 10th place, displacing the M4. I think just about. I think the M4 is a 8057 maybe. So if I can complete this lap, scruffy as it was, we might be able to get it into the territory of beating the M4. Let's see. Question is, does it have what it takes to beat the Testarossa on this lap? 8055, that is very close to the Testarossa, because the Testarossa is an 8055. So we're going to have to see what that was, but this does tell me that this car has a lot to give. See there, a little bit too fast, lots of understeer, really messed up. I should have dropped the gear there, but I did not. Let's continue. Trying to really eke everything out of this car. Again, curbs as well, something to be aware of. Some of the higher curbs, this car with its stiffer suspension does not like the curbs. So another thing to be slightly aware of. Bit of understeer there that I really could have done without. That's going to slow me down all the way through here. May only lose a tenth or so, but still I could have done without that. Let's try and get this correct. There's a place where we normally lock up, so I'm braking slightly earlier and really try not to get the car to step out on me as it did there. Early into third. I think one of the things that I'm learning about this car is that coming out of slower corners, you want to shift up early. Shifting up early does help. Let third gear do the work for most of it, I think, is the right thing to do. So for example here, I'll leave it in third, shift it down to second, and be very, very careful here. Once I'm out of this corner, straight up to third. I may lose a little bit of time. I'm about half a second down on the previous lap, but that isn't too bad given that we had a bad experience on the previous lap coming up in a few corners time. So we should be able to make all that time and more up within a few corners. You see the tyres just locking up there, having to counter steer through that. It's always something when you need to steer left through a right-hander, or indeed right through a left-hander as the case may be, to the one that we're coming up on. So this is where it went wrong last time for me. So let me try to be a little bit better with that. There we go. And you can see the amount of lap time that we have just gained there. Now just have to make sure that we do not throw it away through the rest of the lap. That is also something very important. A car like this, it is very easy, I've also noticed, to overdrive this car. Yes, I think that is a correct statement. It is pretty easy to overdrive this car. You can go into a corner way too fast, you can be braking way too hard as I am there, and it just does nothing for your lap time. It does nothing for your driving experience. I'm trying to think of other cars that are really easy to overdrive like this. Again, the McLaren 570S comes to mind. This really does feel like an odd saloon version of a 570S in a way. I'm not sure why exactly, but it does. I also have a feeling that when it comes to putting this on the driver's ranking, this and the 570S may not be too far apart. I think the 570S was more of a nightmare to drive than this though. This is not as much of a nightmare. Now the question is that can I get this down to an 8 minutes 2? Because that is where the ECGadget is. And I very much like the ECGadget, but can this car get down to that point? Because if it manages to, that is saying something about the speed of this car once you start figuring out how to get that speed down. When I was talking about in the last lap, that my third lap, normally I either crash spectacularly or go faster by a few seconds. This is one of those cases where I seem to not be going faster by a few seconds and not exactly crashing spectacularly either. Just I'm pretty much either at the limit of what I can do with this car at this point in time, or just at the limit of the car full stop with these tyres. You can actually hear the tyre squeal as well, and going around some of these corners I'm slower. I'm faster in some corners by a tenth or so, and I'm slower in some corners by, I would say, probably even a few hundredths off the best time that I've done. That was certainly faster. Just have to make sure no understeer. They're really looking after that car for the understeer. The fast changes of direction like that is an easy place for you to be caught out. Very easy to be caught out on those fast changes of direction. Similarly here, if you just turn it in early, and because you cannot see the curb on the left hand side, you just have to sort of know where it is. There we go. Okay, 1.5 seconds. Where does that put us? 8 minutes 4 still. Can we get it down to an 8.3? That is the question. It's in the 8 minutes 3. 8 minutes 2.699 is the lap time for the Lotus. Can we get anywhere near that lap time? So 8.2699 to beat. Currently 8 minutes 3.517. 8 minutes 3.535. Really making the most of 5th gear there up the hill. Okay. This is fast. This is fast through here. Not something I like doing. 8 minutes 3, what was that, 3:09 something? Well, that is that. I suppose that puts the car into 9th place. So that was actually fairly difficult to drive, I have to admit. That was not the easiest experience I've had with a car like this. So that puts it into 9th place, and that should be up on your screen right now. So it is behind the ECG by only 7/10 of a second. It's about 7/10 of a second between this car and that ECG. The difference being, I think the ECG has a lot more in it with the tyres that it has, whereas this probably only has about a second more in it, in my opinion. It has managed to push the BMW out of the top 10 now, with the Ferrari 512 Testarossa taking up 10th place, though that was again a very close fought battle between the BMW M4 and the Testarossa, two completely different generations, two completely different types of cars, and yet so close on the lap time. Let's go into that. Going on to the driver leaderboards, that is the next one that I need to be looking at. So page 1 was a bunch of cars that I really do like. So for example, the 911R went to the top, the Cayman, so 2 Porsches at the top, Skyline R34, the BMW M3 Evo. I think that the Wallowee was just very nice to throw around, the F40, things like that. Going on to the second page, where I think this car might end up, we're looking at, we have the M4 in 13th place, so I really should be looking at where I'm driving as well as where I am, what I'm looking at on the screen. We have the M4 in 13th place. I do not think this car is anywhere near as good as an M4. The place I'm looking for this car is probably down towards the Elise SC, the Ford Mustang GT, that sort of area. If this car had a little less power, I know this is a really strange thing to say, but if this car had a little less power, I think that it would most certainly be on the first page, or at least, if not on the first page, around the M4. But because it has so much power that is unusable without traction control, at least in Assetto Corsa, and the brakes being so incredibly sharp, and the stiff suspension, that's the other thing, that is what causes it to go down the leaderboard. Please don't crash. There we go. So I'm going to place this car around. Now, the Dodge Viper was really dull to drive, oddly enough. That is why that is low. I think this car is a little bit better than the Dodge Viper, so I'd like to place this car into 18th place on the driver standings. So there we go. So that's going to slot straight into 18th place, 2 ahead of the McLaren 570S, but sadly quite down the order for a car that I think has the capability, certainly if I had traction control on or ABS, certainly would be far up, higher up the order. Maybe not that far up, maybe RX-7 territory, M4 territory, I think there, but at the moment it slots down into 18th place. So that is where I'm going to end this video. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit the like button if you like this video, subscribe to the channel for more videos on Assetto Corsa and the Nordschleife challenge. Leave a comment in the comments box below letting me know what you think. Do you agree with my driver ranking? If you can do so, please do consider supporting me on Patreon at www.patreon.com/ECGadget. Your support would be massively appreciated. It would really, really help me out. And also, you can find me on social media at ECGadget LB, both Twitter and Instagram. Both places I really should be on a lot more. That is all from me. Let's have a bit of a crash. There we go. But since I haven't actually done that in this car, on this video. That is all from me, and I will see you next time in Assetto Corsa for another video, maybe another Nordschleife challenge, I'm not sure, maybe a bit of a different video. I'll see you then.